Here we are. And if you look, come to think of it, well, I got to look at this myself. Wow. What a view.
In a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Monday, the 27th of April, year of our Lord 2026. Well, we had an interesting weekend for some people. I mean, it was, we saw the White House Correspondents' Dinner and all the speculation about the shooting. We're going to talk about that and what happened with that, as well as Kash Patel himself, who played an interesting role in this. We're going to take a look at what has been discovered about Kash Patel and how he was the only person on the shooter's manifesto that was not a target there. But we're going to begin with the things that directly affect us before we get drawn into the Trump distractions. And folks, that's the most important thing about this. We can't be drawn into these distractions away from the actions that Trump is doing to turn us into a surveillance state, to create a global depression and global war, let alone the civil war here in the United States. Yes, his plans are to redefine USA as the united surveillance of Americans. We'll be right back. Well, it's necessary to have prohibition because you got to have these wars: war on poverty, war on drugs, war on this and war on that. These metaphorical wars, folks, are their MacGuffins to give them the tools that they need to make us slaves. There's a global push, interestingly enough, says a New American. It's kind of interesting when you look at the push to ban nicotine globally and contrast that with the push to support and advance marijuana and psychedelics. Isn't that interesting? You know, quite frankly, I think I preferred the Marlboro Man to RFK Jr. and Joe Rogan. At least nicotine had better, cigarettes, I should say, had better advertising. Joe Rogan is going to be our shroom Sherpa, right?
Back in my day, men got lung cancer like John Wayne intended.
That's right. That's right. And so this article is about not really in praise of cigarettes, but in praise of nicotine without smoking. And, you know, quite frankly, I've always felt that there was a big difference between Marlboros and what the old Toby leaf that they were smoking in the Shire, right? That's just tobacco leaves rolled up rather than all of the heavy duty processing. Don't you think, and I'm surprised that nobody has said this. I mean, when I would watch these cigarette commercials that were rampant when I was growing up, I always thought with all the additives that they put, oh, it's menthol and it's got this filter that's, you know, asbestos that cools it down and all the rest of the stuff. It's like, do you think it might be that stuff? You know, it's kind of like the demonizing of meat when the real issue is the ultra processed meat. Perhaps it's the ultra processed tobacco that is the issue. But anyway, it is an interesting juxtaposition, isn't it? but they always have to have something to prohibit, because war is the lifeblood of the state. And prohibition gives them an opportunity to go to war with us and to go to war with the Constitution and the rule of law and many other things. So nicotine is the latest target, and it is happening globally. You know, they have just passed a law in the UK to say that anybody who is under the age of 16 today will never be allowed to smoke. And I kind of look at this and I say, well, what gives you the right to do prohibition anyway? And it never works. That's the other issue. It's two different issues. One is this good for me or bad for me? What are the risks involved? That is an issue of informed consent. And in many cases, it is a spiritual issue with a lot of these drugs. It definitely is a spiritual issue with marijuana and psychedelics. And the New American does not go there. I look at this. I was just talking to a friend over the phone, Mark Hall, who did a document, was working on a documentary about stem cells, and had some very interesting updates about what was happening in Japan, for example. In Japan, the FDA, their drug association that approves things, has a very different approach to the FDA here. Here, everything is prohibited unless expressly permitted by the FDA. And then if they give the thumbs up, then we all believe that it's safe. And everybody's guard goes down. And nothing could be further from the truth. The FDA does not do the kind of due diligence that should make you feel good about taking anything that is FDA approved. You need to do your own due diligence on everything that they approve. Even after they go back and put a black label on particular drugs, that's to protect them and to protect the pharmaceutical company. That's not to protect you, because the doctor doesn't need to tell you about that black label, and the pharmacist doesn't need to tell you about that black label. And if they don't, you can sue them if you can prove it, but you can't sue the FDA and the pharmaceutical company, because they said, well, we told them, we put the black label on there, and so the doctor and the pharmacist should have told you. It's not our issue. We've given ourselves legal cover in all of this. It is so deceptive, every aspect of it. And so, at least when I was growing up, we had some great commercials. Now all we get are psycho drugs from Rogan and RFK Jr. And what they're selling this for, it truly is an interesting commentary on our times. As I said before, when I talked about the psychedelics, I said, the only thing that has worked, they had people who came in, they said, well, we went to psychiatrists and they gave us these drugs and they told us these things about our PTSD and it didn't work. Well, you might want to try Christ, the great physician. That's the only thing that has helped, really. And again, in the high 80s to lower 90% success rate for people who take that route versus the ludicrously small success that they have with these other drugs. And that's not the only issue. I mean, there's a more important issue than this, but it truly is a spiritual issue at its root. So marijuana and psychedelic substances are being pushed. At the same time, you see this, for instance, in the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, or as Gerald Celente calls her, Hochulberry. She is trying to put a 75-cent tax on cigarettes. And I forget whether that's per cigarette or whether that is per pack or whatever. But she wants to put a pretty big 75% tax, not 75 cents, but a really big tax on top of the already really big tax in New York. And that's the other issue with it. They decided that for tobacco, they would basically do take a shot at a kind of de facto prohibition by taxing it. That's the approach they're taking, by the way. In California, maybe there are places that started legalizing marijuana. Okay, we'll make it legal, but we'll tax it so highly that people will start a black market with it. And that's what's already happened with cigarettes in New York and other places like that. That's one of the reasons why, what was that guy's name? Was it Eric Garner, I think? There was a black guy who was selling what they call Lucy's on the street.
Yeah, I believe
and he got
you're right.
choked out, by the prohibition cops, right? You can't sell a single cigarette on the sidewalk. It's like, why not? But why did they do that? Well, because they were bringing these things in, and they did it to escape the confiscatory tax that New York State had done. So, he was doing that and selling individual cigarettes in kind of a tax-free way, right? So they were skipping the tax, and they killed him over that, which is just one of the many people that have been killed over their prohibition and taxes for the longest period of time. The research continues to come out that nicotine has been found to be potentially an aid in recovery from COVID-19. It serves as an anti-inflammatory agent. It boosts cognition, even prevents Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So why the crackdown? And by the way, that reminds me of what I wanted to say about what Markall was saying. It wasn't just about how the FDA works, but versus in Japan. Here, the FDA, as I said, everything is prohibited unless they expressly permit it. It's a complete inversion of the Constitution of human rights that we have as creatures of God. But in Japan, what they do is they say, well, if this is, we have to test it to see if it's safe. And if some people can take this and they don't have any ill side effects, then you're free to run your studies. You're free to give it to people as long as you can show that it doesn't harm people, right? So that opens up the avenue to a lot of different therapies, one of them being stem cell therapy. And of course, stem cells do not have to come from aborted babies. There's a lot of different ways that you can get stem cells. And and a lot of other things, a lot of natural ingredients that are there. So as long as it's safe, you can give it to people, and then they will approve it if after you give this proven safe drug to a lot of people, if you can prove that it is effective. So safety first, first do no harm. That should be the ethical guidelines of the medical community. And it is the way they operate in Japan, not the way they operate in the United States. They do not want informed consent, and they want pharmaceutical profits. That's what we have seen over and over again. And so, again, what needs to be prohibited is the FDA and all of HHS. You need to bring back informed consent. That is the last thing that they want. They don't want our consent, and they do everything they can to keep information away from us. In January 2025, in the 11th hour of Joe Biden's presidency, writes the New American, Biden pushed hard to essentially begin the death of nicotine through FDA regulations. The Biden-era rule sought to establish a maximum nicotine level in tobacco products. In a press release, the FDA revealed that they would cap the nicotine level at 0.7 milligrams per gram of tobacco in cigarettes and certain other combusted tobacco products. The FDA regulation would not touch on non-tobacco products containing nicotine, such as gum, patches, or pouches. Democrats have been pushing for years to restrain the sale of non-tobacco nicotine products, however. Chuck Schumer called on the FTC as well as the FDA and the Federal Trade Commission as well as the FDA to investigate nicotine companies. Democrat governors are hopping on the bandwagon. Again, Kathy Hochul, a 75% tax on non-tobacco nicotine. Meanwhile, she is going to take the money and she's going to set up research centers to push marijuana and psychedelics. I mean, that's the perfect example right there. The reason for this, they say, is to protect the children. Always, right? That's what digital ID is supposed to be. Everything that they do is supposed to protect the children. Well, no, and we're going to talk about a disaster that is unfolding with identification information in Europe. They've had massive data breaches in a couple of different places, and the people have been harmed, and the government just goes on. So again, politicians will not be molested, but kids perhaps will. That's the other thing I'm going to be talking about, and that is the Michael Jackson film that came out over the weekend. And then at the same time, we learned that there was a film that has been spiked that was going to be about Prince. We have all of these music idols, and surprise, surprise, these guys are into rape and violence, pedophilia, all the rest of this stuff. It disgusts me to see the headlines, Michael Jackson uncanceled. He's not uncanceled in my mind. Anyway, the war on nicotine and tobacco is not just happening in America. It's happening in the UK as well. The House of Parliament agreed to a final draft of legislation that would literally ban anyone born after January 2009, like I said before, 16 years old or younger, a lifetime ban on nicotine. How about doing that for vaccines? Well, they won't do that, I guess. I said this is going to be the biggest public health intervention in a generation, and I can assure all the public, I can assure all the noble lords that it will save lives. This is speaking in the so-called House of Lords, as they lord this over us. New Zealand already tried this back in 2022, but they quickly reversed it. When they got in a new prime minister, he cited concerns about the rise of the black market. Imagine you prohibit something that's commonly used, like alcohol or tobacco or marijuana or whatever, and you have a big black market that shows up. And then along with that, you have the corruption of the police and the courts. You have the creation of black market gangs, and crime goes up and all the rest of the stuff. They said, and also a big impact on the economy. Prohibition always fails. And in the United States, prohibition requires a constitutional amendment. That's why we have the 18th and the 21st Amendment, one of them to give the government the authority to prohibit, because they don't have that authority. And the 10th Amendment says if you haven't been given any explicit authority, you cannot presume it. You can't infer it from the Commerce Clause or the Supremacy Clause, or pick your excuse that they've used in the past. If you don't have an explicit authorization, and that's what the 18th Amendment did, and they got rid of it with the 21st Amendment for the same reason that New Zealand reversed their prohibition of tobacco. So the WHO is a key perpetuator of the COVID-19 lockdowns, social distancing, masking, and mass vaccination. And they are now jumping in on this as well to try to prohibit smoking. You know, it makes me think of back in 2020, the video was showed it dozens of times to just show the folly of the masks. As I said before, the big problem that they had, if you looked at it, you don't even have to question whether or not vaccines in general. You could stay within their paradigm and just assume that it's true. Assume that the vaccines are going to work as they say, that your immune system works as they say. And then the vaccines, the viruses are something that they have identified. And it's all inconsistent. A good example of it was the people who put on a mask and then they'd inhaled a cigarette and they exhaled, and you could see the smoke coming through the mask, not just out the sides and the top and bottom, but through the mask. And the point was that they tell us that the viruses are such and such a size. The smoke particles were far, far larger than what they say the virus particles are, because they say we can't see the viruses, not under a microscope. So that was one thing that I played over and over again to show the folly of this. And, even within their paradigm, which I believe is a false paradigm, a lie about viruses and vaccines, even within that paradigm, they can't be consistent. It's like a bad superhero or science fiction movie, you know? You got to make it logically consistent or it just sucks. That whole story sucked. Anyway, despite the consistent global push to ban and regulate nicotine, marijuana and psychedelic drugs are being deregulated, with Kathy Hochul, again, as the prime example, creating a center for excellence in cannabis care. And she's going to build it with partly paid for by the 75% tax on cigarettes. And it is, as I said before, I think it is the ultra-processed aspect of it that's the most harmful thing. Just like it is with our food. You can take normal food and you process it. You add preservatives, you add emulsifiers and lubricants and all the rest of the stuff to get it to go through your machines. And they did even more than that with tobacco and cigarettes. This week, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche finished the job ordering the rescheduling of marijuana to a Schedule III substance. Why don't people ask where this schedule came from? I mean, for years, I just assumed that it came from Richard Nixon because he declared it has his war on drugs. But the schedules, 1 through 4, that are out there with drugs listed in them. And of course, Schedule 1 means that it has no medical use whatsoever. And yet the reality is that I think more than half of the states have legitimized marijuana use for medical marijuana. So that puts a lie to its classification as Schedule 1. And you've had Republicans even for a long time have said that it needs to be moved. But again, people need to look at this and understand that this is a UN agenda. If conservatives can only care about what's being done to the Constitution, if they can only care about this being a UN agenda, we might be able to make some progress on this. And if you had Christian conservatives who realized that Christ is more powerful than a drug, we would make a lot of progress, wouldn't we? Anyway, Boston University School of Public Health researcher Alyssa Harlow uncovered that for men who use marijuana one or more times a week, their partner is twice as likely to miscarry than the partners of men who use marijuana less than once a week or not at all. Harvard Medical School has also published materials linking marijuana to a cognitive decline. So again, I'm not a promoter of drugs for solving our life. This whole idea that we got problems in our life with addiction or with PTSD. Well, there's got to be some drug that we could take, some pill that we could take, whatever. That is a false paradigm, but it's the one that Americans keep reaching for over and over again. There are other things that are more lasting and more effective, and we ignore them. We don't even try them. Nicotine occurs in the nightshade plant family, notably in tobacco leaves, but also in significantly smaller quantities in crops like tomatoes, potatoes, and eggplants. I've never smoked a tomato, have you? Because I've never smoked pot either. So anyway.
It's going to lead to a rash of kids out there smoking potatoes and eggplants and things.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had secondhand cigarette smoke and I've had secondhand marijuana smoke. I don't like either one of them. Quite frankly, it makes it hard for me to breathe. A 1991 paper by a neuroscientist and co-developer of the nicotine patch. He said nicotine in its pure form has a potential to be a valuable pharmaceutical agent. This is back in 1991. He said regular nicotine use via non-smoking methods may result in protection against Parkinson's disease, Tourette's disease, Alzheimer's disease, ulcerative colitis, and sleep apnea. But here's the thing. If you're taking it in a non-smoking form, what are you also not getting? You're also not getting the asbestos. You're also not getting the other chemicals that they use to process this and to form it into a cigarette. So who knows what the real culprit is? And again, they will not go against the businesses. Many opinion molders have weighed in, including Tucker Carlson, who has his own nicotine pouch company that he calls ALP. In Australia last year, Carlson said nicotine has the byproduct of raising testosterone levels and making people a little harder to command. And that is perceived as a massive threat, he said. It is a life-enhancing, God-given chemical. That's just my view, he said. Well, what about his view of mRNA? Well, his view of mRNA was, I'm not taking that stuff at all, and he had some reasons for it. But he didn't share that with people. Why? Because of the money. As he said, there's certain things you can't talk about. You can't talk about Building 7 or you'll get fired. And clearly you couldn't push back against COVID and or the vaccine without getting fired, without getting canceled everywhere, as even little guys like me got canceled everywhere. Contrasting the continual praise and deregulation of marijuana and the opposition of nicotine, conservative pundit Michael Knowles noted, marijuana makes you lazy, dumb, and passive, which is why leftists want it to be used by the masses. Nicotine, on the other hand, makes you more alert. It makes you think more quickly and clearly. It is not a party drug. Well, that may be part of it as well. I wouldn't put it past them. And of course, fluoride has the effect of lowering IQ. And I saw people wringing their hands. It's like, with this Trump war against Iran, Or I guess we should just call it the Zionist war against Iran, because Trump is a Zionist, and that's really where this thing started. But with the Zionist war against Iran, we're running out of fluoride for our water systems. So you see, with every bad thing, there is a silver lining. Just like with the COVID lockdown, there was a silver lining that parents got to see what was actually happening in the kids' classroom, caused an explosion in homeschooling. So, yeah, we won't be able to add the fluoride to the water in the same quantity that we used to do in the past.
You see, that was all Trump's plan all along. It was 4D chess. He knew the fluoride had to go, but how to get rid of it?
Yeah, that's right. That's
Destroy Iran.
That's right. That's why his EPA is fighting the people who won the lawsuit to stop fluoridation of water. They're fighting that. So, yeah, that is not his 4D plan. Unless he's fighting against himself. Pure genius, right? I'll fool him. I'll fight against myself.
Never let your left hand know what your right hand is doing.
That's right. Well, the WHO is building a supranational vaccine authorization mechanism. What is it based on? Emergency. Everybody run from the building, right? That's what it's based on. Ask someone else to take responsibility for the second part of this approval process so that I won't have a conflict of interest. I'm also working with Bill Gates and the World Health Organization on the vaccine itself. That was a statement made by an Israeli professor, Shulman, Lester Shulman. He was the secretary of the Ministry of Health's polio committee in Israel. They got a new polio vaccine. Did you realize that there was a polio emergency? Well, maybe you didn't realize that because there isn't a polio emergency, but they're pretending that there is, so they can rush this through. You see how everything that Trump did aligns with the globalist agenda, with the World Health Organization agenda. But, Trump is against the WHO, right? Wrong. He's not. They are one and the same, quite frankly. And what happened that makes this really interesting is that this happened a little while ago. They were talking about this happening in Israel. And of course, they used Israel as the beginning point for this, which they frequently do. Remember Netanyahu and how he offered the people of Israel as lab rats to Pfizer. Said, put us at the top of the list for these vaccines and we'll give you all the information about our own people. Well, they're doing it again. This time, what they're doing is they're using Israel as the leaders of Israel are doing this to their own people. And what they're doing is setting up the mechanism for the WHO to be able to declare an emergency, create what they call an EUL, emergency use listing, and push that onto sovereign states. So again, look at the people who are the globalists. Look at Trump, look at the Zionists, look at the leaders of Israel. They are the globalists, and it is their agenda, and they're rolling this thing out. It was an unusual confession. Talk about a conflict of interest, especially because they had already pushed this thing through and voted on it before he talked about that. But what made it the most interesting was the fact that his statement was not put in the notes of the meeting. You can hear it on the audio recording, and then they did not put it in the written transcript of the hearings. The fact that he had a conflict of interest, and it was Bill Gates, World Health Organization. This is serious in its own right, but it goes far beyond a local episode of personal conflict of interest or administrative failure within Israel's health system. The materials point to something that is more consequential: the use of an international emergency authorization pathway to shape regulatory decisions inside of a sovereign state, advanced through overlapping professional networks without the organization assuming the legal responsibilities borne by national regulators. So this is a way for them to get around it. And again, where does it go back to? Emergency. When you are ruled by emergency executive orders like Trump, this is basically martial law, folks. I said it from the very beginning. I said this is medical martial law when he started all this nonsense in 2020. This is the first implementation of the EUL mechanism within a country with a functioning Western regulatory system. Israel served here as a regulatory test case, an attempt to determine whether it's possible in practice to shape an approval pathway inside of a sovereign state without holding formal regulatory authority and without being subject to the judicial parliamentary oversight that applies to a national regulator. So again, government by emergency is always going to lead to martial law, to tyranny. And that is what Trump does. Everything, nobody has used executive orders more than Trump. We complained about it with Obama. We complained about it with Biden, and rightfully so. I mean, you had conservative organizations, and I talked about it, went back and totaled up. Look at all the executive orders that so-and-so's had, right? And how they were escalating. Nobody has done it more than Donald Trump. Nobody. And yet the conservatives are now completely silent about it. And the left is not going to complain about it. They want a strong, all-powerful, totalitarian government. In recent years, the WHO has developed mechanisms that expand its influence beyond recommendations and, in effect, enable it to directly influence regulatory and authorization processes within states. The central mechanism is this EUL, Emergency Use Listing. And again, Trump is their puppet. He is a co-conspirator, at the very least. Maybe he works for them. Who knows? We can't tell with that kind of degree of detail. We just know they're both on board with the same agenda, both of them pushing the same thing. Once an EUL is activated, it maps out the timetable, the milestones, the starting point of the discussion. Think about that when you go back and look at Trump and his 2020 COVID nonsense. They had everything worked out, didn't they? They had a plan. They had a goal. They had, we got to lock everybody down until we get this vaccine ready. We're going to clear all the hurdles till we get the vaccine ready. I'm going to give them money to develop it and to manufacture it. We're going to have the military deliver it to people and blah, blah, blah. It was all worked out. And everybody was following a plan. And every country was following the same plan. Macron would do it. And then, Biden would do it at the same time. And then they would say, and then 2 months from now, because of this quote unquote emergency, we're going to take the next step. It's like, if it was an emergency, you'd be doing all this stuff all at once. No, this is a conditioning. It's not an emergency. And so contrast what Trump did in 2020. This well laid out plan. And of course it was well laid out. They had practiced it for 20 years with these annual germ games, starting with the first one, Dark Winter, 2 months before 9/11. And so they know exactly what they're doing because they'd practiced it for 2 decades. But look at the Iran war. This is all ad hoc improvisation. Well, I don't know what's going to happen next. Let's try this. And he'll reverse himself on the same day as to what he's going to do or how he's going to do it. Absolutely no planning at all, because this is Trump. But the other stuff was a global conspiracy. He was just one of the kingpins of it, pushing it through. So during COVID-19, emergency authorization became the operative pathway. And so now the EUL is going to translate this after this conditioning, after they move the Overton window. They're going to take this to the international level. That's what this is all truly about. And this polio vaccine they've come up with is called the NOPV2. I would pronounce that as Nope V2. So when they ask you, do you want to take this? You say, nope. It is a polio vaccine. This is the one they're talking about in Israel, where they were kind of showed their hand there. And again, what is the polio emergency? There is none. There's no polio emergency here.
In fact, polio is one of the things they continually point to about how vaccines have been a benefit. Look, we wiped out polio with vaccines. It's gone.
That's right. So how do we have an emergency about it now?
Why do we need an update, fellas? What's going on?
Its development and its clinical studies were funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which also contributed...
Warning!
Danger, Will Robinson. Which also committed $1.2 billion to support efforts to advance it as part of the polio eradication strategy, right? Well, remember when we went through the Epstein documents, there were things in there where Jeffrey Epstein was helping Bill Gates to figure out how he was going to operate his quote-unquote charity for profit. Yeah, Bill Gates loves to tell you, I'm not making any money off this stuff. I'm just a philanthropist. No, he's making a lot of money. And the guy who helped him to do it is Jeffrey Epstein. And so when we look at this, I thought, we think back to the pandemic time. This is an article from Wall Street Journal. America's pandemic car bubble is now trapping buyers in debt. When I saw that, I thought, the car was our way to escape the pandemic bubble. We can get in a bubble and we can go somewhere. I mean, a number of times I've seen people, husband and wife, inside a car, windows all rolled up and everything with the masks on, and we would just laugh at them. We deliberately drove around more often than not with the top down, even in cold weather, just to kind of thumb our noses at this whole thing, without masks, of course, either. And so I remember we had the top down and we were in Bastrop, and there's a bunch of people out. This is in the summer, as a prelude to all these riots that happened later that summer. And they were holding up signs that said, help, I can't breathe, which is referring to the police. And what was the guy's name? I should know. I just pushed it out with some other stuff. The guy that, George Floyd. And so they're holding signs say, I can't breathe. And they're standing there with a mask. And so we drove by them and I just yelled at them. I said, take your mask off then. So they didn't. And I wouldn't have said that if I had to walk through there, but I was in a faster car. So I didn't want to get the whole mob after me. The average amount a borrower with negative equity carries on a vehicle has jumped more than 40% since 2021. And what they're talking about here is somebody who comes into a dealership, they interview, always start with an anecdote. And so they talked to a guy who's a Mercedes dealer. He said, a guy came in, he wanted to trade in his Ford EV Lightning F-150, right? They took the most popular vehicle in the world, the Ford F-150 pickup truck, turned it into an EV, and it became a massive loss leader. I mean, Ford has lost billions of dollars off of this stuff. This guy comes in and he thinks that his car is worth, not what he thinks it's worth. He still owes $87,000 on it. No telling how much he paid for this thing. And he said, I had to tell him that it was only, trade-in value was only $47,000. So it's $40,000 underwater with this. But, the bottom line was that the car was the escape valve. That's one of the reasons why automobiles must be ended, why they need to lock us down in the 15-minute cities where we're on foot, is to hobble us and to make sure that we don't have any escape route. It truly was the escape route. I remember we came through in 2020, in August of 2020, we went from Austin to Raleigh because Karen's brother was sick at the time. And we made a point of passing through here, through Gatlinburg area, because we always like to come through here. And everybody was out and around. And many of them did not have masks. But it was amazing the number of people that had come here because they couldn't fly places and they couldn't go other places. So they got in a car and they drove to Smoky Mountains. And then they get out and they walk around. And most of them did not have masks on. And the people who were working in the various places were wearing masks. And, if you bought a ticket for some ride or something, they'd have but they weren't hassling anybody. And I even asked some of them, I said, did they make you wear the mask? And they go, But they weren't enforcing that on anybody. They had signs up that said you had to wear a mask and all that, but they didn't enforce that on anybody. So that was a big plus for us when we thought about moving here. It's like, okay, well, they're pretty relaxed. And even the tourists are a bit more relaxed. When they came here, nobody was breathing down their neck about rules with that kind of thing. And then the question is the world ready for a car without a rear window? Which made me think of this classic clip from Gumball Rally.
And now, my friend, the first rule of Italian driving. What's behind me is not important.
That's right. Yeah, he just grabs that rearview mirror and pulls it off. And I did the same thing on my sports car. It's kind of interesting too. I thought The reason I did it was not because I was inspired by Gumball Rally. I always remember that. I always laugh about that. But when I was sitting in the car, it's kind of a small car, and it had a large rearview mirror. And when I would look over, if I was stopped at a four-way stop or something, the placement was large enough and low enough that it would block me being able to see the cars that were coming on the right, that were going to be coming across the intersection. I'm like ducking under it and all that. I was like, this thing is a hazard. I don't need this. And I thought, well, is it going to be a problem? I need to be able to see behind me. And so what I did was I put some convex curved mirrors on the side view mirrors. And the side view mirrors I use as my as a replacement for the center mirror there. And the convex thing gives me actually better visibility than I had before. It shows me if somebody's in what typically is your blind spot, on the back corner of your car. So, it is not necessary. But now they've come out Polestar, which I think is a Volvo. They either bought Volvo or they relabeled Volvo. They're coming out with a car that doesn't have even a window in back. As they point out this, and I thought this was kind of interesting, it said, in most English-speaking world, the vehicle's front glass panel is called a windscreen. Americans call it a windshield. That's because the air does not come through it. Air comes through screens. But unless you got a problem with your windshield, unless ice is just taking a shot at you or something, you don't have any air that is coming through that windshield. What we refer to as a rear window is more widely known as a backlight. This archaism comes from the era of horse-drawn carriages, gives you some idea of how long rear windows have been around. Well, again, if I'm in a convertible, backlight is pretty meaningless with the top down. I got light all over the place. But it is kind of interesting that they are going to replace this essentially with a digital display. It's going to show what's on the back. And I think that's a better solution, quite frankly, because you can keep your eye forward better, put it in your line of sight to see what is behind you. But, the cheap solution is to just rip this thing off and get a couple of these convex mirrors that stick on for like $1 or $2. It's unbelievable how cheap they are. I put them on all the cars. As a matter of fact, it was so effective. But, the fear-mongering of all this prohibition, especially when it comes to climate, okay, that's where they want to get rid of the cars, what they're using, the climate MacGuffin. That is not going away. This article from the Daily Mail, from Maldives to Venice, the 17 tourist destinations that could be wiped off the map by the end of the century. No, they're not sinking. Venice... they're not, the water level is not coming up higher. As a matter of fact, I've talked about this. It's so stupid that they talk about how in the same area of the Pacific Ocean, they'll talk about two different islands and say, look at this. It's going up at a faster rate at this island than it is off the other one. So it's like, well, maybe it's because the islands are sinking. And maybe that would explain why two islands that are not that far away from each other, one of them is having the water level come up higher, because it's not that the ocean is getting higher, it's that the land is getting lower. By 2100, says Daily Mail, climate change is expected to drive average global sea level rise of between 17 and 33 inches. Expected? By whom? Not by me. I don't expect that to happen. The one thing that they're getting smarter about, though, is the time frames are getting longer. Remember, they used to always tell us, 20, 30 years out. Well, now we have seen that they were lying, because they've been lying about this kind of stuff now for half a century. So now they're going to go 80 years out. That's what they're talking about. In the next 80 years, this is going to happen. So, you make it long enough, then you can pretend that you got it right. Nobody will remember your prediction. Major cities like New Orleans and Tokyo are projected to face serious flooding. Low-lying island nations like Fiji and the Seychelles are at risk of disappearing entirely. Just like RFK Jr. said about snow. He said our children will never see snow. Yeah. This is the guy who is telling everybody that Trump actually got it right when he said there was a 600% decrease in medical costs with the Trump RX program. Yeah, you can't do math. Don't go to him for science advice. Meanwhile, places like Venice are sinking. And not sinking, they say that 6 feet of sea level rise. Sea level is not rising in Venice. The city itself is sinking, and we've known that for a long time. That was talked about before they started all of this global warming, rising of the seas nonsense as well. And it was kind of interesting. I don't remember how long ago it was. It was sometime within the last decade. We talked about this. They showed, first you had a situation where the canals went dry in Venice during a drought. And then shortly after that, they flooded and the level went up higher. And guess what the media did? The media pretty much ignored the drought, where you saw the dry canals and everything, but they really hyped the flood. Just as they hype the weather anomalies that change when it reinforces their narrative. Again, the public is still being...
Also, another reason you don't have to worry about this is God promised he's never going to flood the earth again. So
that's right.
You can rule that out of hand.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, it's going to burn, not going to flood again. Of course, they've forgotten the meaning of the rainbow. They've co-opted it for Sodom and Gomorrah, which was burned, by the way. Anyway, the public is still being benighted about all this stuff, but the liars are getting smarter. They're going out 80 years instead of 20 years on the fear story. But this is, again, the Daily Mail. And this is a very long article, 20 pages of fear-mongering, just to let you know that they're not giving up on this climate nonsense. The number of drones being deployed to surveil anti-Trump protesters, meanwhile, is staggering. And this is an article that came out from The Intercept, and they started looking at the amount of drones that are being used by the LA police during some of these No Kings riots, not riots, they were protests. They were peaceful protests. The LA Police Department launched drones at least 31 separate times during a single ICE Out protest January the 31st, which culminated in the arrest of at least 50 demonstrators after they issued an order to disperse around 9:30. So there wasn't anything violent. They just said, you can't be here anymore, and if you disobey that order, we will arrest you. A few months later, at the March 28th No Kings demonstration, protesting Trump, the LAPD launched 32 surveillance drones. Police didn't issue an order to disperse until 5:30 p.m. Flight data viewed by The Intercept shows the drone coverage of the peaceful demonstration began, however, 3.5 hours earlier at 2 p.m., and it continued until 9 p.m. So The Intercept asked LAPD for a comment on this, and they came back and said, well, we don't document or record unless there is a crime that is occurring. And yet there wasn't any, peaceful protest is protected under the Constitution. And you're saying that the crime is when you tell them that they've got to disperse and go home. If they don't do that, now a crime is being committed. But you were surveilling people 3.5 hours before any possible crime could have been committed. We're looking for specific people, they said. But they point out, paradoxically, he then added that sometimes the department launches drones to see how big a crowd is. Well, there's now more than 1,500 police agencies in the U.S. deploying drones in some way or the other. Mass aerial surveillance threatens to become routine as privacy protections remain way behind. And that's true. We're talking about the flock cameras. It's true of all of this stuff. Understand that there's one thing that the Democrats and Republicans are in 100% agreement on, and that is the United States of surveillance, right? The United Surveillance of America, USA. That's what they all agree on. Meanwhile, what does this look like when we start giving an ID to everybody? One of the things people have warned about is when you start collecting biometric data on people and you start using that as the means of identifying people, you can't change your biometric data if it gets stolen. It can be faked, but you can't change it. And so we just had a situation where the French authorities had a data breach, and the people that got this, they've now got data on about a third of the people in France. And the very next day, they're selling it on the black market. And so I guess, the question is, can 50 million Frenchmen be wrong? They can be wronged, by their government that requires ID and then can't protect that ID. This is what the people who are pushing back against this have pointed out over and over again. This is Reclaim the Net pointing it out. On April 15th, something broke, and a week later, the Interior Ministry confirmed that anyone watching digital ID schemes has been saying about this exact architecture for years, and the scale on offer from the attacker makes the warning harder to wave away. So a threat actor got this information, and it appeared on criminal forums the next day, April the 16th, claiming to have stolen between 18 and 19 million records from the agency's internal systems. Roughly a third of France's population is sitting in a for sale listing. They got their IDs. The seller described the haul as a fresh structural compromise rather than a recycled dump, and is actively shopping it. And a similar thing happened in Europe, Eurail, which is a common pass. I mean, this thing goes back to 1980 when Karen and I were there. They had Eurail passes where the different countries worked together you could buy one pass, and it could be honored in a lot of different places. The place that is running Eurail is out of the Netherlands. It's
An important
Dutch
thing
company.
to remember is that the government, across all governments, selects for the exact same type of bureaucrat in all positions. The lady at the DMV that is officious and lazy is also working at Eurail, is also working at the place that houses this data. That's the exact same person in all these positions. They are little carbon copies of each other. They are incompetent. They are slow. They are stupid. That's what they want.
What was that Disney animated thing that where they had all the animals? They had they went to the DMV and they had a sloth that was there, and everybody's lined up and it's just moving super slow.
Zoo something. I don't remember.
Yeah. Zootopia, maybe?
Yeah, that was it.
Eurail wanted people's passport numbers in order to ride on a train. Well, they got them, and then they lost them. But here's the kicker. 308,777 people had their passport number stolen. Now what they're being told is that they need to cancel their passports, and they need to pay for replacements and go through all the hassle of getting another passport. They're not even cutting them any slack. And so, we lost your stuff, so you're going to have to cancel it and apply for a new one. The Dutch company confirmed this week that a sample of stolen data set has already surfaced on Telegram. They said the breach happened December the 26th of last year. Eurail only began notifying affected individuals March 27th, 2026, 3 months after they lost it. Then they started telling people. And a full month after the data appeared on a cybercrime forum. So it took 2 months for the data to appear on a cybercrime forum, took 3 months for them to tell people, and then they say, this is your problem, cancel your passport, and go get another one, go get in line.
Also, eventually the government will just cut out the middleman and sell your data themselves.
Yeah.
The DMV already does this. The reason so many people get so many spam calls is because the DMV is legally allowed to, in quite a few states, disseminate and sell your information to advertisers.
That's right. That's right. The U.S. Clarity Act is now going to get done in May, says Mike Novogratz. Novogratz, I guess that's how you pronounce his name. Anyway, he's someone who has been working with, he's with Galaxy Digital. He's the CEO, and he's been working with the Trump administration to get this thing through. You got all these crypto bros. This is just another group that has, that Trump has prostituted himself to. All the crypto people. And so now you'll be able, as we look at all these different data breaches and everything, now you'll be able to put all of your money on the web and just trust them to keep track of it. Trust that nobody's going to give it up. Yeah, it's wildly important for us to get this done for both Democrats and Republicans, says Cointelegraph. And that's a quote from this CEO. They want the Clarity Act, which is going to set up a regulatory framework for this so we can all trust it. And so, again, both the Republicans and the Democrats, it's very, very important for them to get it done. Both of them want this done because they need it for surveillance and control. This is the problem that I have with Marsha Blackburn here in Tennessee. She has been at the epicenter of all this AI as well as digital money stuff. And, I don't trust anyone. I don't care what letter they put behind their name or what color they where. They can be red or blue, R or D. It doesn't make a difference. They want to set up the United Surveillance of America. That's what both the Republicans and the Democrats want to do. There are 8.5 billion people, he said. Probably 5.5 billion of them don't have access to our financial products. You see, this is what it's about. If they can, with the Clarity Act, they say, well, we can, a lot of people can't buy and sell stock on Wall Street and that type of thing. So if we can put this stuff on the blockchain, we can have people all over the world join our casino on Wall Street. And that's what it is. It's a casino. So this is about Trump's donors and owners getting rich while we get risk. They get rich, we get risk. That's what it's all about. And they keep playing the same movie over and over again. This phone with a crypto wallet is going to be the way the kid in Bhutan or Botswana or Bolivia or Paraguay, you name it. That kid's going to be participating in the American economy, and Lutnick and his pals are going to get richer and richer, selling them hopium and a bunch of worthless stocks. I mean, I've watched this stuff my entire life. I don't own a single stock, and I will never buy stock again. I mean, I watched our competitor when we had video stores. I watched our competitor, Blockbuster, lose money for decades because they could keep getting more cash on Wall Street. And it's like, why would I invest in a situation like that? I mean, they've got a line of cash that is just like the Federal Reserve for these people. Trump's vast fortune, by the way, which has been really put on steroids with his crypto ventures, his vast fortune could be wiped out by a judge's ruling, says one legal analyst. What this judge ruled was that lawsuits against Trump for people who say that they were damaged by January the 6th and blame him for it, those can proceed because he does not have immunity. He did not do that in his official capacity. He did it as part of running for office, which takes away that immunity. That was the ruling of the judge in a large decision that they said towed the line pretty closely to what the Supreme Court has said in terms of immunity. But the bigger issue is Trump's corruption and how much money he has made. Now, this is a very interesting video, a graphic showing how Trump and the Trump family have enriched themselves in just a single year. The guy does it with cups. I think each cup represents $10 million. And he shows the amount of money that has been accumulated by all the presidents combined in the last 100 years and how much was made by Trump and his family in just the first year.
Every cup that you're looking at is $10 million. And this small stack over here to start with, this is a representation of a full century of U.S. presidents' personal wealth growth while they were in office. We're talking Coolidge, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Reagan, Bush, Biden, all of them except one. 4 cups, roughly $40 million in total, and that's what all the modern presidents combined gained while serving over an entire century. Total, not per president. Now shift your eyes to this monstrosity. 1 year, 1 president, same cups, same scale. 1 century versus 1 year. Not opinion, it's visual math, and your eyes are doing it in real time. So take a good look. All of the presidents, including successful business owners over here, 100 years versus less than a 1-year period of wealth accumulation for 1 president. Donating a salary is just a headline. It doesn't offset the billions quietly being accumulated elsewhere. If you're telling yourself it's because he's a good businessman, then ask one question. If nearly 50 years in business didn't produce anything close to this, but 1 year in public office did, that's not skill, that's corruption. Nothing you can say can explain this. And if you're at the point where you say, I don't care, I'm not changing, then you own it. And this is what it looks like to sell out America and call yourself a patriot. I hope you learned something. I'm always rooting for you.
You think we're going to see that? And there's this data that he's got there, how much each of these people got. Do you think we're going to see on social media, I voted for this? You voted for this criminal? The art of the steal? I mean, we've never seen open corruption like this. And that's a great graphic. You see $40 million on the side, 4 cups. And then you see $3 billion that he's got stacked up there. And he's got it in a pyramid that goes up about 12 feet high. Yeah, that's the Trump corruption that's there. So, again, when we look at what might happen with the January the 6th lawsuits, there's already been several people who are members of Congress, political, they're going to do it for those purposes, as well as some Capitol Police who say that they're going to sue him. I had a listener who kindly sent us a donation and wrote in a letter, said, just so you know, he said, I went to January the 6th. I went there not to support Trump, but to protest the stolen election. And it's like, I understand, my thing is, because I participated in third-party politics, I understand how elections have been stolen for decades. And it begins with ballot access. It begins with debate access after that. And then it goes to things like electronic voting machines as well as stolen voting machines. Those are things that have stolen voting machines have been around for a long time. Then we went to electronic voting. That opened up a big Pandora's box of corruption. But the biggest corruption was what he did at the last minute by locking everything down with the election. And that is the vote by mail stuff. Trump created the conditions for the stolen election. And yet he had the gall to say that it was done against him when he was the one who was in charge, and he's the one who did that. It's just like the lack of logic when people say, no, he's just a great businessman. Well, then why didn't he accumulate that kind of money when he was a businessman for 50 years? And why did he make that kind of money that he couldn't make in 50 years in less than 1 year as president? It is simply corruption. Measuring the amount of corruption lining Trump's pockets is like shoveling on a snowy day. It just keeps coming. As of late January, Trump had pocketed upwards of $4 billion. That guy, that's a little old video. Again, it's still snowing. The corruption, the snow job is still ongoing. And so that video that you just saw there was $3 billion. It's now gone up to $4 billion. And that's really why it is necessary to have those kind of visual aids. I mean, we look at 40 million versus 3 billion. When you just look at those numbers written down on paper, especially because it's a 40 versus a 3, you don't really think it through. It's kind of like what you do with a young kid. When you hand them a couple of bills, you give them a $1 bill and you give them a $20 bill. Which one you give them 5 $1 bills, right? Or something like that, or 120, and they would rather keep the greater number of $1 bills in many cases. We just can't get our head around the difference between millions and billions. And we certainly can't get our head around the difference between billions and trillions. So Trump had pocketed upwards of $4 billion from untraceable cryptocurrency ventures. So that's the key thing. It's an ideal way for him to launder money. He can put out meme coins and he can put out other things like that. People can buy this stuff anonymously, and it's hard to track. And he can have these events at Mar-a-Lago that is part of the promotion of his crypto ventures and just rake in the cash. There's also the suspicious market manipulations and outright bribery from foreign and domestic sources during the first year back in office. It better be thinking about how to hide it, because the U.S. District Judge Mehta has ruled that Trump is civilly liable for damages that he caused on January the 6th. Mehta ruled that Trump was not immune against civil claims for damages coming from January the 6th. And I would say there's also damages done to MAGA. I think the MAGA supporters, the people who were there, I think they were damaged more than anybody in Congress. I think they were damaged more than anybody that was part of the Capitol Police. The question is, will they turn on Trump in order to sue him? Judge Mehta's cautious 79-page ruling denied Trump civil immunity through careful analysis largely devoted to distinguishing between Trump's criminal actions as an office holder and his actions in seeking office, which are not official acts, therefore not immune to lawsuits. The decision carefully followed the Supreme Court's immunity ruling and will allow claims against him from members of Congress and Capitol Police officers to proceed to trial. I just got to say, I think one of the things that really worked in Trump's favor before the fake assassination attempt at Butler, Pennsylvania, before that, it was the lawfare that Biden was doing, and there was just a sense of injustice about that. And yet now what we've seen from Trump is that he's as bad, if not worse, than Biden. And then you can add to it corruption that is worse than Biden's. Yes, Biden was very corrupt, and what was happening with Hunter was widely known and went unpunished. And yet that doesn't give Trump the right to do this. Right? Two wrongs don't make a right. We're not going to go into moral relativism. That's what MAGA would like to do, to explain away. Well, what about the Biden people? Look at what they did. Well, that doesn't give Trump a free pass to steal and to do it right in our faces. And so I think if lawfare were to happen to Trump at this point in time, I think people would see him not as a victim again. I think they would see it as just reward, reaping what he had sowed. Think about the fact that he has filed $10 billion lawsuits against the Wall Street Journal for the Epstein birthday card thing, which was true, against the BBC because he didn't like the way they edited things, against CBS 60 Minutes, another $10 billion. There's three $10 billion lawsuits right there, mainly because he doesn't like free speech. But then there's also Michael Wolff. We don't know what that's going to be. Melania had threatened $1 billion lawsuit to anybody who repeated the claims of Michael Wolff, who said that he was told by Jeffrey Epstein that Jeffrey Epstein had introduced Melania Trump to Donald Trump. And we've had now another individual who's come out and gone further, saying that Jeffrey Epstein knew Melania Trump before Donald Trump. And I mean it in the biblical sense. And was boasting about that. But anyway, we don't know what he's going to sue Michael Wolff for. I thought it was interesting that Melania was threatening people who repeated what Michael Wolff said. And I said, why is she suing him then? And didn't do it for a long time. I think maybe they realized that maybe Michael Wolff did not record what Jeffrey Epstein said. It'd be kind of interesting to see if we're going to find out if he had a recording of that. Typically, when you do an interview like that, you make a recording for these very reasons. Well, Donald Trump and the MAGA memory holes. There's two very different memories about what MAGA was supposed to be all about. And let's go fishing in the memory hole, says J.D. Hall. He said, gaslighting is when somebody makes a person doubt themselves, to make them think that they're going crazy or maybe imagining things. And again, this is from a Hitchcock movie. We need to make, just as gaslight has become a very well understood a thing, and it's a very good description of what's being done to a lot of people. I think the MacGuffin needs to be put in the dictionary as well. Doing my best to do it. Of course, you can get the T-shirt or the sweatshirt or whatever. You can get that at our site as well. But I would like to see the MacGuffin put there, because that is something that is being done all the time. And it usually is upstream of the gaslighting. And so I think, when we look at MAGA, maybe it's Make America Gaslit Again. Maybe that's what it really stands for. But he points out, he said, if you've been feeling a low-grade vertigo, there we go, Hitchcock again. If you've been feeling low-grade vertigo lately when talking to fellow Republicans about Trump and Iran and what MAGA has always meant, that's not confusion. That's your memory working correctly in an environment that is specifically engineered to make you challenge your memory. He says, I'm creeped out a lot lately by fellow Republicans who are swearing up and down with utmost seriousness that MAGA has never been anti-war, that Trump never campaigned on no new wars, and especially not with Iran, and that the neocon Beltway Uniparty war pigs have always been Trump's biggest supporters. Well, that's not true, and I've played the clips over and over again of Trump, of his surrogates, and it's not just Trump, it's everybody who was part of that. You had his running mate, J.D. Vance, said that. Tulsi Gabbard was pushing that really hard, and all these people are now part of his administration who have signed on to war of aggression. We're the ones who started this war along with Israel. Not only did they forget about the no new wars, but they're starting the wars, and starting them in the places where Trump had condemned it the most, in the Middle East. So he says, I'm not creeped out because they're lying. Lying is natural and normal part of politics. I'm creeped out because they believe it. And that's what really freaks me out. We look at the neocon Beltway Uniparty war pigs he's talking about. He's talking about people like Mark Levin, Lindsey Graham, Ben Shapiro, all these different people, they're the ones who hated Trump in the beginning, if you remember. Now they're the ones who love him the most. Does that tell you something? They have not changed. Trump has changed. Well, in Tennessee, we got lawmakers clashing over a bill expanding the use of force. You know, when we talk about justification of war, as I've said many times, the ethics of it, what's right and wrong really doesn't change when it becomes a big institution. We are always told this. We're told, for example, in economics, that there's a difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics. The Keynesian theory said debt doesn't matter. Well, you and I are about to find out that debt really does matter, unfortunately. We're going to, experience is an expensive school, but it's the only one a fool will attend. And unfortunately, the American public has been fooled by the Keynesian economists. Debt does make a difference. And it doesn't just go away when it gets really, really big and when it's done by the government. And morality makes a difference as well. And morality doesn't go away when the government is doing it. If it's wrong for an individual to do it, it's wrong when the government does it, if it's morally wrong. And so one of the things that I've said for the longest time, we talk about what is a just war, what makes a war justified. Well, it's something that is just like if somebody breaks into your house, you're justified to defend your life and other people's lives, taking that person's life in order to stop it. If your life is not threatened, you are not justified in attacking. Well, it's kind of interesting. That is the law in all the states except one, Texas. In Texas, you are allowed to kill somebody in order to protect your property. And Texas is the notable exception. Their law allows for deadly force to be used to stop the, quote, imminent commission of arson, burglary, robbery, aggravated robbery, theft during nighttime, or criminal mischief during nighttime, as well as to prevent a suspect from fleeing immediately after committing burglary, robbery, aggravated robbery, or theft during the nighttime from escaping with the property. And so I've said this many times, you are justified in using lethal force against somebody who is coming at you. But if they've got your television set under their arm and they're running away from you, you're not justified in shooting them in the back. Well, in Texas, they say you are. God's got a different approach. You're not going to stand before God and say, yeah, but Texas said I could do it. That doesn't work that way. So you're ultimately accountable to God, not to the state of Texas. And he has a different standard of this. And that's why I said, when you look at the justification of war, the purpose of war, if it's justified, is to protect people from an attack, to stop, and the purpose is to stop the attack and to not hurt innocent bystanders in the process. So you don't target civilians, as the U.S. and Israel are doing constantly. And so Tennessee is talking about doing the same thing that Texas is doing. But there's a caveat with all this. As one of the Democrats who was part of the Tennessee Three said, this is, Justin Pearson, said, you can now kill people over property. And I don't think that's right. I looked at that and I thought, yeah, I don't either. Do I agree with one of the Tennessee Three people? Strange bedfellows, right? Well, actually, he's wrong about what the bill says. He's right about what the bill proposes to be doing. But the bottom line is, as Admiral Akbar would say, it's a trap. You got all these gun owners and people who are hearing this, well, we're going to make it legal to kill people to protect your property. And yet the bill doesn't do that. The bill doesn't really change anything. It's billed that way. It's got a label to say that it does that. But in reality, if you look at the law, it doesn't. And so if you kill somebody when you're not threatened, you are still, in Tennessee, you're still going to be held accountable for that. While the Senate version of the bill did include language allowing deadly force to be used to prevent trespass, theft, and damage to property, the House amended the legislation and limited deadly force to the kinds of crimes that have always been identified under special circumstances to say that deadly force is justified to protect yourself. So despite being framed as a protection of property measure, it expressly prohibits the use of deadly force unless there is imminent threat of death, serious bodily injury, or grave sexual abuse to a human being, or on circumstances where lesser force would expose a person to those same risks. This does not create an independent right to use deadly force to defend property. The 2026 amendment contains essentially the same person-centered threshold of imminent threat to a human that already governs Tennessee's self-defense law. The amendment appears to have changed nothing other than potentially misleading the public and tricking them into making choices for which consequences will have felony charges. The defect in the legislation is that it was clearly filed and marketed as a property rights reform, but it entirely denies property owners the ability to rely on deadly force to protect property unless the facts independently amount to a classic self-defense scenario. So it's a trap. And I got to say, I would not agree with killing somebody over property. You have to live with that, and you have to answer to God for that. But the dangerous thing about this is that it's been billed that way because Republicans want to beat their chest and say how much they support the rights of gun owners. Except owning a gun doesn't give you the right to kill somebody. That'd be a big mistake. So we got some comments here before we take a break, Travis. And we're going to when we come back, we're going to talk about what happened at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And there's a lot of speculation about that. We'll be talking about that when we come back. Go ahead.
We have iHandy, and of course you can find iHandy on Substack. Check him out. Just look up iHandy, and you should be able to find it. It says, I went toe-to-toe with my boss over the masks. I showed him the fine print on the box. His only argument at that point was, it was policy.
Good for you, Andy. Yeah, I had that experience with restaurant owners, as a matter of fact, too. I would go into these small restaurants because I knew the chains were going to, the people would say, well, that's corporate policy. I can't do anything about it. My hands are tied type of thing. So we, during that period of insanity, we went out to eat a couple of times, and I went to, on purpose, went to places that I knew were locally owned. And when they told me I had to wear a mask to sit down and then I could take the mask off, I said, let me speak to the owner, and I did speak to the owner. And I said, that this is absolute nonsense. I said, you're telling me I got to wear the mask to get a seat, but as soon as I get a seat, I can take the mask off if I'm sitting down. But I can even stand up and walk to the restroom, and I don't have to put a mask on. I said, that's nonsense, don't you? And he goes, yeah, but it's policy. He said the same thing to me. And I said, well, my policy is I'll never come back to your restaurant again. And we left, but it was not a pleasant situation. But I'm not gonna go along with that kind of nonsense.
Epstein Island says no more geriatrics with ties to depravity in office.
Yeah, that'd be a start, wouldn't it? Yeah, Trump actually fell asleep last week. They were having a lot of during a public meeting. He's dozing off, and so they started all this Sleepy Joe Biden stuff that he did. They threw that back in his face.
We have Real Jason Bark. You can find Knights of the Storm as well on Rumble. Check out their website, knightsofthestorm.com. It says, because Plymouth Rock is now underwater, right?
That's right. Certainly isn't. And we've had situations, as a matter of fact, during a drought that were showing the fact that some writings that had been there for several centuries now appeared on some rocks. And so these are things that were typically out of the water. So they made a big deal about that. And it's like, okay, but the water level has now come down to show that, and standard water level is up a little bit higher than that. But that's a good point, Jason, and we know that's not the case. I mean, you have, just as we were talking to the miner the other day when he was talking about these big mines, he said they go through to get the copper, and they are, taking it out, and it's subterranean. And so what you wind up having happen is the land gradually starts to go down and collapse. We used to see this all the time in Florida with the sinkholes. Those are legendary down there. But what we're seeing is the land that is going down at some of these islands. That's why, the water level is going to be the same height across the Pacific Ocean. It's not going to be changing, except with the tides. It goes up and down with the tides, but it does not go, it's not higher in one spot and the next. Water just doesn't work that way.
That's been my entire life. They've been warning us that the coastline is slowly going away.
Yeah, and why they do, when they do that, if you go back and you look at where are Obama and a lot of these climate billionaires and the politicians who are pushing this stuff, Where are they buying property? They're still buying it on the seacoast. Obama doesn't believe that stuff. He spent millions of dollars on a seaside place that, if you go back and you look at the climate mob, they have websites that show where they think, what they think is going to be underwater. Well, Obama is buying all this property. It's going to be underwater. It won't just be the EVs.
We have DG8. Thank you very much for the tip. He says, David, this past weekend was staged. They figured Butler, Pennsylvania worked so good. They tried it again. Nobody believes any of it. The world is a stage. We got no representation in D.C.
World is a stage. And
I think I remember that Rolling Stone song, right? I can't get no representation. Wasn't that how it went?
I think I remember Shakespeare, going back to his days. The whole world is a stage, right? That is that is the case.
DG8, thank you again. Says, on these White House Correspondents' dinners that Trump was going to attend was an LGBT event sponsored by Grindr. Disgusting. It's a hookup site. It's actually a gay hookup site. So, Yep. And Dougalug, thank you very much. That's very generous. He says, a little gas for the tank. Thank you for the great interviews last week.
Well, thank you. I mentioned last week as well, this, you talk about these LGBT conventions and everything. Of course, Israel has been a big, big leader in that. There's a large area of Tel Aviv. There's a real pioneer in it, as much, if not more so, than San Francisco being a pioneer in all this stuff. And now they've got a big festival that they've essentially put at the site of Sodom and Gomorrah. You can't make this stuff up, but they can. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Making sense common again. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
APS Radio delivers multiple channels of music right to your mobile device. Get the APS Radio app today and listen wherever you go.
Oh, good, I can't maneuver.
Stay on target.
We're too close.
Stay on target.
Loosen up!
Yeah, we need to, when we think about this so-called assassination attempt, we need to stay on target. And I don't mean Trump as the target. I mean the target of his policies. Trump has got things that he wants out of this. He wants distraction. He wants the victimhood of all this stuff, and he wants his ballroom. So he's going to use this for his own purposes. And so are his supporters. And say, poor Trump, they're really after this guy. I saw another one. Missed again, a-holes. Somebody went up there. It's like, I don't buy that for a second either. But the left is also going to use it for their own agenda. Gun control, they're already talking about that. Just understand that both of them are going to use it for their agenda of the police and the surveillance state. That is the key issue here. So this guy, the gunman that they tackled, Cole Allen, supposedly sent out an anti-Trump manifesto to a lot of family members, which laid everything out for them, very convenient. So a lot of people are looking at this and saying, well, that's kind of suspicious. But you do have this from some of these people. They want to go out in a blaze of glory. So there's a bit of an ego thing with him. What I found most interesting about it was the fact that he wrote that his targets were, quote unquote, administration officials, not including FBI Director Kash Patel. He prioritized them from highest ranking to lowest, he said.
Maybe he figured Kash Patel's liver would just do the job for him eventually.
I don't understand what the deal is with it. I had a listener who sent me an email and said, David, look at this. This guy's been pictured with Kash Patel, and he gave me a link which didn't show that. And I looked over social media, and I couldn't find any pictures. Searching for Kash Patel and this guy's name that they were together. So I'm really not sure about that. I mean, I'll just pass that on to you. If you got any evidence of that, let me know. I'd be interested. I can't understand why he would exempt Kash Patel unless he's got a racist thing against white people. He's going to give Kash Patel a pass because he's dark-skinned. I don't know. It's the only thing I can think of. What were you going to say, Travis?
I just want to say, anytime anything like this happens, there are entire systems dedicated to just generating fake headlines because they get clicks. It's bad at normal times, but anytime anything major happens, there's this spike and uptick in fake stories, fake headlines.
And a lot of those are coming from outside this country. Just like I was saying last week, this one guy said, I realized that I could create a great-looking female avatar. I could get AI to create a beautiful young girl, and I could have her say all the things that conservative, middle-aged and above men think, and talk just like them. And I could make a lot of money. He's a guy who was in medical school. He's studying to be an orthopedic surgeon in India. He tried various things that he could do in terms of being a tutor and other things like that. He just couldn't make any money. But when he does that, he was able to not only sell that persona. He said first he started doing softcore porn with them, and he was told by the AI program, it's like, everybody's doing that. You can't stand out doing that. So do something different. Try to appeal to this niche market of MAGA people. The older guys that got more money, they'll send that money to you anyway. So that's what he did. And he said, I'm making a tremendous amount of money doing this. And so these guys have realized that they can get a very large following on social media if they feed your expectations and tell you what you want to hear. And so I think that is an interesting thing that was in his manifesto. He didn't want to target Kash Patel. I don't know why. He said also to minimize casualties, I'll just be using buckshot rather than slugs because he wanted to, he had a shotgun or whatever. And he did, evidently, from what they're saying. And again, I can't verify any of this stuff. I mean, whenever you look at a situation like this, everything that you hear is just like what you hear from Israel about what's going on in Gaza. You can't trust what you hear either side say in a war. And this is a war, right? It is an information war, and it is a war against the American people as well. So we have to be careful of what we buy into. And I would just say, be careful about what you spend your energy on as well. Because the real issue, that's why I played the stay on target thing. Stay on target. I mean, what Trump is doing is he's pushing us into a global depression, a world war, and he's creating a police surveillance state here at home. Those are the issues, folks. Got to stay on target with this stuff. He also referred to his Christian faith several times in the document. He also made mention of some hot-button political issues. He was particularly upset about the strikes on Venezuelan drug boats and the detention of illegal immigrants. He said, turning the other cheek is for when you yourself are oppressed. I'm not the person that's being raped in a detention camp, and I'm not the fisherman that's executed without trial. I have a lot of problem with what Trump has done with this stuff as well. And I looked at this, I said, yet again, I find that I fall in line philosophically with these people who are mass murderers. It's like the difference is that as a Christian, if he's going to make a Christian justification for this, you got to go back to thou shalt not kill, right? You don't get to ignore that because you see an injustice there. And understand that God has established the powers that be. And when I look at Trump, I see Trump as the judgment and the curse of God. And so, you got to Nevertheless, there are appropriate ways to do these things and inappropriate ways to do it. As a Christian, you have to submit to the things that you wish were not there. He says, I'm not a school kid that's being blown up. I'm not a kid that's starved. I'm not a teenage girl that's abused by the many criminals of this administration. Turning the other cheek when somebody else is oppressed is not Christian behavior. It is complicity in the oppressor's crimes. That is exactly right. But that doesn't excuse certain actions are not then excused by that, right? There are many things that we can do to oppose this, short of killing somebody. And quite frankly, just from a pragmatic standpoint, do you really think that this stuff would change if Trump were killed in an assassination? J.D. Vance would just step right up, do the same thing for the technocrats, the same thing for Israel, the same thing for the crypto people. And he's got the same masters, the same donors and owners that Trump does. There's a long list of people that can be put into that spot. And so effectively, it would not change at all. So he also mocked the insane lack of security at the Washington Hilton, which is also something that has fed the conspiracy people, the fact that it was so amazingly incompetent that perhaps it was a setup. He said, the one thing I immediately noticed walking into the hotel is a sense of arrogance. He said, I walk in with multiple weapons. Not a single person there considered the possibility that I could be a threat. So in other words, he walked in, and they did not evidently scan his bags for guns or anything like that. He said, the security at the event is all outside. They're focused on protesters and the current arrivals, because apparently nobody thought about what would happen if somebody checked in the day before. You know, that was the kind of thing that we did in Copenhagen at Bilderberg, right? We knew the hotel where they're going to be staying, and Alex Jones and company made reservations for us there. Of course, we went in, and they already had the scanners that were set up, and the lobby was full of cops. We filmed it when we walked in, and they said, no, you don't have a reservation. We canceled your reservation. It's like, well, thanks for letting me know, you know. But anyway, they had better security, far better security for the Bilderberg people in Copenhagen than they had for Trump at the White House Correspondents' Dinner at the Hilton. I mean, far better security for that. The FEC records show that this guy made a one-time contribution donation to Lala Harris's presidential campaign of $25. Big spender in that. And he also had displayed a sign for a local Democrat-backed judge in his front lawn. But, you know, when you look at this is another thing that has come out of this. Zero Hedge and many of the Trump supporters on social media have been pushing this as, look, this is just what happens because of the liberal mainstream media. They're pushing the tribal angle, which is, you know, what Trump has been put in office to do. Trump has been put in office to create a domestic civil war, in my opinion, and he's doing a pretty good job of it. He's got everybody hating everybody else, and he can extend this out to a global war with a trade war and the insults even to Canada. He's even got Canadians hating America. This is the guy that mixes it up with everybody, and we don't need to help him doing this. And quite frankly, the liberal mainstream media, he doesn't need their help either. He can do it all on his own. But when you look at the conservative media, many of them will say, see, that's what happens when you've got freedom of the press. No, it's what happens when you've got somebody like Trump that's been put in who doesn't care about freedom of the press or any other freedom for that matter. He is activating the division far more than mainstream media is, I think. Just look at the fracture within his own party, for example, right? It's been tremendous fracturing because the guy can't even tell the same lie for 24 hours. He's giving us different versions of what's going on with the war, just a few hours apart. And as this was all happening, just before this happened, you had somebody put up a video of Trump and Epstein that put together a 2-minute video about the two of them together. They projected it on the hotel just before the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Nobody's talking about that much. I was alerted to that by a listener, and I looked for it, and I found a lot of different places where Newsweek, for example, I found 2 or 3 places, but there really hasn't been much talk about that at all. It's all been about speculation about who the shooter is, what his motivations were, was it a setup, was it allowed, and all the rest of this stuff. But, he's got people not paying attention to him and Epstein, doesn't he? Works out. So Trump's ties to Epstein were reportedly highlighted in a video projected onto a hotel that was hosting the dinner. Aaron Parnas posted the 2-minute clip on X. Shared a photo showing an image of Trump and Epstein projected on a building in Washington, D.C., identifying it as the Washington Hilton. The source of the video montage remains unclear, but the incident appears to seek to use the attention of the dinner to bring the spotlight back to Trump's association with Epstein. The video montage included clips and photos of Trump and Epstein, as well as images of heavily redacted documents from the Epstein files. It also included an email that was sent by Epstein to Arthur Michael Wolff in 2019, where he referred to Trump as the dog that hasn't barked. It ends with a photo of Trump and Epstein with the text saying, "End the cover-up." So that was what was happening right before the dinner. And of course, when you look at the dinner, Trump skipped these dinners throughout his first administration. He had had a contention at the White House Correspondents' Dinner he attended when he was running for office, and Barack Obama attacked him in that dinner, making jokes at Trump's expense about the fact that Obama had played games with his birth certificate. And quite frankly, Obama did play games with his birth certificate. I mean, he had his people put out this document with Photoshop layers on it. They didn't even flatten it. And so it was pretty obvious that they had played some games with it. Maybe that was intentional for them to play games with it. But we knew, as I said before, the real issue was not the problem so much on his father's side. I mean, his father might have been a communist organizer here in America, or it might have been this guy from another country, which brings up some issues about censorship. But his mother's side of the family was a real issue, because his mother's side of the family was CIA, some of the founders of the CIA, her parents, his grandparents on his mother's side. And she worked for USAID, which is a front organization for the CIA. That should have been the warning thing. That should have been the focus, more so than the birth certificate. Anyway, the birth certificate did a great job of distracting people's attention away from his CIA origins. So anyway, the correspondents said, Trump, now admit that I am truly one of the greatest presidents in the history of our country, the GOAT, greatest of all time, according to many. And so he said, I'll be happy to attend and go toe-to-toe with him. And, of course, that's another aspect of this. Just before this all began, Caroline Leavitt was having an interview, and she said, yeah, there will be shots fired. So that set off a lot of people. But, of course, she could be saying that metaphorically. For more than 100 years, the journalists of the White House Correspondents Association have enjoyed an evening with the president, a dinner that celebrates the First Amendment. What Trump is doing his best to assassinate, quite frankly, the First Amendment. When you look at all the multi-billion-dollar lawsuits that he's filed against people because he doesn't like what they had to say about him. I mean, filing that lawsuit of $10 billion against CBS simply because he didn't like the way they'd edited Lala Harris's interview. It wasn't even his interview. It was ludicrous on the face of it. But, of course, he got millions of dollars from it because he was going to weaponize the government to block the sale of Paramount, and the woman who owned it, Redstone, heir, she inherited it from her father, Sumner Redstone. She had cancer and she wanted to offload this thing and get the money. And so they basically paid him off as a condition to go away. Trump says, meanwhile, that the White House Correspondents Association dinner shooting was a, quote, religious thing. Well, he said it was strongly anti-Christian. Actually, I think, what he said in terms of, unless there's something that I didn't see reported in there, what he said about turning the other cheek, he said that's for when somebody is attacking you. If somebody is attacking someone else, you have a duty to help. He was absolutely right about that. That wasn't anti-Christian. What was anti-Christian is to say, well, I'm going to take it into my own hands and I'm going to kill this person. That is the issue, the way that he wanted to defend people. So as I said before, God has ordained government. He didn't recognize that. But when you look at what is happening with the what Tallarico is doing in Texas, redefining what Christianity is and what the Bible says, and pretending that he is a seminarian. Maybe he really is. Maybe he really is attending a seminary. Maybe the problem is with that seminary. That seminary, if they don't disassociate themselves from him, they're done. Maybe they're fine with that. I mean, there's been a real drift in the Presbyterian Church of America for a very long time. It's been going on for a century. Maybe they've gotten to the extent now that they're producing people like Tallarico out of there. But Trump immediately jumps in on his other hobby horse, which is, well, that shows that we need to have the White House ballroom. And as many people have pointed out at the very beginning, you look at some of the plans and the deep excavation that was there. They said this is going to be some kind of an underground facility. Now they're admitting it, and now that it's its key selling point. And the question is, why does he need to have a bomb shelter so close? Well, it's because he is expecting to push a global war. That's his position. That's the real issue here, folks. The real issue isn't the aesthetics of the White House ballroom. Is it going to spoil this building that has been there for centuries and so forth? And is it going to be an eyesore? Is it going to be something that is grotesque and large and in his name, like his Arc de Trump, that he's doing as a parody of the Arc de Triomphe in France? The real issue is that these people feel like they're going to have a nuclear shelter. And with the advance in missiles, they may not have the time to get to the shelters that they've had in Greenbrier and other places in the past, even if they got a helicopter to take them there. So they want to make sure they've got a shelter right there by the White House. That's the purpose of this, because he's pushing us into war. His plan is to protect himself and to let the rest of us die. That has been the plan of the American government since the beginning of the Cold War. This is just another aspect of it. The plan to save himself and save themselves and let the rest of us die. That's what this is truly about. And so he says, we need to have the ballroom. Here's an idea. Maybe you wouldn't need the ballroom if you weren't such an aggressive criminal, murderer, warmonger. Maybe you wouldn't need that. Why could you have Jefferson and Adams walk down the street talking to each other in their day and arguing with each other because they were from different political parties? Why were they able to walk down the streets of Washington, D.C. without a single bodyguard for the two of them, the president and the vice president? Oh, well, what would happen if they both got killed? Who would control the button? Well, they didn't have a button. We weren't an empire either, and we had no aspirations to be an empire. They didn't want to run the world, and they didn't want to rule us that way either. That's why they could walk down the street unmolested, because they weren't a threat to so many people. Our presidents today, whether it's Trump or Biden or any of them, they're a threat to everyone. In America, everyone in the world is threatened by these people. It's no wonder they're so paranoid and trying to protect themselves all the time. Now they need an army of personal bodyguards. Authorities said that the suspect was armed with a shotgun, forced his way past the Secret Service, shot one of the guys who had some body armor on, and he was not injured by that. Randy Fine out of Florida says, we'd better never hear a peep from anyone complaining about a White House ballroom. Well, I'm going to complain about that, Randy Fine. I'm going to complain about your Zionist attacks on our First Amendment as well. You're going to get a lot of peeps from a lot of us because you don't get to tell us what we can say. Shut up. I'm sick of this guy. Go to Israel and live if you want to there. I'm sick of the wars. I'm sick of the underground shelters that are being made. And then the Democrats come out. Of course, J.B. Raskin says the next day that all happened on Saturday. He gets on one of the talk shows on Sunday. And he says, maybe this is a moment where we can have unity for universal background checks. Well, it's not going to be hard for you to get unity with Donald Trump on gun control. We've seen that in the first administration, where he sold people out and said, I can do gun control by executive order. Fortunately, I can ban this and I can ban that. And Biden immediately followed on with that, whether it's a bump stock or whether it's a pistol brace. And, of course, Trump started the pistol brace ban. And Biden decided he was going to do that with everything. But, of course, the Democrats have been pushing very hard on a number of fronts, especially in Virginia, You have in Virginia, as one person pointed out, you can't sue a judge when he lets off a 35-time felon who goes on to stab your daughter to death. But victims of gun violence can now sue gun manufacturers if they are negligent in Virginia. That's what the Democrats have done. This is why I say, when we look at certain things like war and global depression that Trump is doing, those are things that we really can't do anything about at the state and local level. But when it comes to gun control and when it comes to this LGBT attacks on kids and other things like that, those are things that we know the Democrats are going to come after us with that. But those are things that we can fight at the local level. And I think we can fight them better if we don't think that it's all being taken care of by our savior in Washington, Donald Trump, because he's not taking care of those things. And so, this whole thing about suing gun makers, they've now gone back to that in Virginia with the Democrats that are there because, the Second Amendment is not enough for them. And so it's not even enough that they've had this strategy that they've been working on doing this now for several decades. And I think it was back in the 90s that Congress passed a law that said you can't sue a gun manufacturer if they weren't negligent in manufacturing the gun. I mean, if somebody grabs this and uses it to kill somebody, that's not the gun manufacturer's fault any more than it is Ford's fault. If a guy did this, he got a Ford Bronco and he ran through the Christmas parade. Remember that? That happened. And he killed a bunch of people. Well, the car manufacturer is not responsible for that any more than the gun manufacturer is responsible if he'd used a gun instead of a car. It's absolutely absurd, but it shows where they are. And of course, I think they can get some, especially if Trump wants to, play the victim. He's already predisposed to do gun control and to do it himself. And so, again, the New American points out that the mask had already dropped. They'd already come very close to saying, let's just ban all guns. As a matter of fact, you had Mom Danny say that as well. Going back to 2022, the guy who's now the mayor of New York tweeted out, he said, we need to ban all guns, right? And they're coming pretty close to that. We've had Dianne Feinstein say, well, if you could get away with it, if I had the 51 votes in the Senate, I could just say, Mr. and Mrs. America, turn in all your guns. I would have done that if I could. Well, that's not the way it works. See, she doesn't care at all about the Constitution. You're going to need more than 51 votes in order to change the Constitution. You have to get rid of the Second Amendment. Now, of course, the government has all kinds of unlimited force, but they don't have the authority to do any of that. And that's the key issue. We can always fight them when they have no authority to do something, and we can fight them at the state and local level. So a staged theatrical event was what was trending on Blue Sky, which is where it's kind of a social media for the leftists. But some other things had triggered this as well. As I pointed out, Caroline Leavitt in an interview said, well, there will be shots fired. But you also had an interview, actually had Fox was talking to one of the correspondents that was there at the dinner, and she had this to say about what Caroline Leavitt's husband had to say to her.
I want to just quickly tell you, I was sitting next to Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary's husband. He was one of our guests. He was seated right next to me, and right as the dinner was starting, the national anthem happened, and then he kind of leaned over and said, I watched you on TV, you do a great job. You need to be very safe. And he was just very serious when he said that to me. And he kind of looked around the room and he said, there are some...
Then her phone dropped. Okay.
Sounds like we lost Aisha's phone there. And this happens, by the way, especially when you have so many people attempting to utilize the same cell service at the same time. I did want to add this. While we had a moment, I was just reading.
And he said, and they're cut off, right? Well, I got to say, I've had situations like that happen. I had that happen when we were at the Bundy Ranch out in the middle of the nowhere. We were losing cell phone connection with a lot of people out there. I've had it happen here in the Gatlinburg area when they get so many people involved there. It's just a capacity issue that is there. It is surprising that it would happen in Washington. But when you look at those things, you look at what that Fox reporter said, you look at what Caroline Leavitt said, And then you look at the lax security that is there. But those are all circumstantial things. I say we have to be very careful if we jump on board and say that this is this is fake. I mean, my opinion about what happened with Butler comes down to Trump's ear. And that, as I played for you, I believe that is totally fake. I believe he cut his ear. I don't think that he was hit with a bullet. You can't convince me otherwise. I think that's the very clear evidence that that was a fake. A lot of people think that it was fake, and I'm one of them. But, we don't want to say that about everything when we are just starting to look at something. If you immediately pronounce that it's fake, be careful, because what you're going to wind up doing in many cases is you're going to discredit what you have pointed out about some of these other things that truly are fake. And so you have to be very careful about that. I think that's one of the issues that happened with all the Sandy Hook stuff, right, with InfoWars. It was Steve Pieczenik again who was pushing that nobody died, it was all a lie type of stuff. And you had people say that about every single shooting after that for a very long time. And it's like, well, that's not really the case. I mean, they can, it's far more effective for them if people do die. The question is, who did it? For what purpose, right? How is it being used? That's the other thing. Regardless of whether it was genuine and organic or whether or not it was completely staged and false, how is this thing being used? I think that is the most important thing. And if we get too hung up on the other stuff, which is going to be difficult, if not impossible, for us to prove, because we don't have the powers of investigation that the government has, and the government doesn't want to investigate it. They've got people like Kash Patel, and they don't want to investigate this. So, again, he's mocking the lack of security. Many other people are saying, well, it looks like this is a setup. And I think that is a question that needs to be asked. But then the other question is, what's going on with Kash Patel? Why did he give him a pass? And I think it's kind of interesting because after this Atlantic article, and they've now doubled down on this, he said, well, I'm going to sue them for billions of dollars or whatever. Millions, I think it's 250 million. I think is what he came after them for. But they've now doubled down on that. The correspondent there who wrote that, the reporter at the Atlantic, said, yeah, I've had a whole bunch of people that have contacted me since that came out. So they've witnessed the same thing. And of course, one of the key issues there was that he was drunk so much that he couldn't really execute his job. But we know that he's traveling around and partying. That's not a question. We've seen him take the FBI jet to Scotland to play golf. We've seen him take his girlfriend across the country and accompany her on concerts that she's giving and things like that. What was new about it were the allegations that he was AWOL because he was hungover in the morning. In one particular case, they said they had to had to call for a battering ram to open the door because he was non-responsive when they tried to call him. And so you've got people, especially the Iranians, who are parroting all the people in the Trump administration. You got this Kash Patel parody of this. This is a Lego figure. It's got gigantic eyes, just like you see with Kash Patel all the time. And so they actually did this, and this is their little Lego parody of Kash Patel. And it begins with breaking the door down. Battering down the door, Kash drunk and laying on the floor. Trump eating a taco.
To break it down. Same night loop, same white eyes, glass there stuck, don't even hide. Door go blast,
Again, that's kind of a target-rich environment. It turns out that Kash Patel was arrested for public intoxication and public urination, says a unearthed disclosure. Now, this was something that was disclosed, that came out from The Intercept. This is something that was disclosed during his confirmation hearings when they were vetting him. It's something that happened when he was in college. And he seems to be acting, however, just like he did, like you'd expect a freshman in college. He's been given access to alcohol without parental supervision for the first time. But when you look at what he did with the hockey team, going to the Olympics and everything, again, taking the FBI jet abroad. So The Intercept reported that he disclosed his arrest in a 2005 letter that accompanied his application to the Florida bar. The unearthed arrests, they noted, are not uncommon for those in their teens and 20s. Well, I don't know. I've been around a lot of people who did alcohol and drugs. I don't know any of them that had this happen to them. I know that there was a judge in Raleigh who was at a party and he got drunk and he relieved himself out back. And he was removed from the bar. And he was removed as a judge and removed from the bar. And they charged him with a sexual offense. And they put him on a list of sexual offenders. I mean, I thought they went a bit overboard for that. I didn't think it was really something that he should be on a list of sexual offenders for. But certainly, maybe the phrase sober as a judge did not apply in this case. Might have been warranted to take him off of the bench. Patel stated that when he was a junior at the University of Richmond, he was arrested for public intoxication after he was escorted out of a basketball game. He was underage at the time, and he said he paid a fine. He said, some friends and I were out celebrating. Of course, now he takes his friends on a private jet to another country, and they celebrate in pretty much the same way over the hockey victories that are there. But they said on multiple occasions, his security detail had trouble waking him because he was seemingly intoxicated. In one incident, his detail requested breaching equipment because the director was unreachable behind the locked doors. And that's the reporter at the Atlantic, Sarah Fitzpatrick. And Kash Patel said, yeah, go ahead and say that stuff because I want to have some money. I was suing him for $250 million. And he says that he's not going to have any problem getting that. Well, again, it's not just the Lego parodies of Kash Patel. There's been a lot of Lego parodies of the Trump family as well. And their corruption. I thought it was kind of funny. I'm not going to play it. I've got it here in the thing, but I'm running close on time. When they did the Lego parodies, they had Barron, and he had a pair of Legos on him. He was like 3 times taller than everybody else on the board that was there. But I think one of the creepiest things that I've seen in terms of AI is this clip. While we're talking about parodies and AI stuff, this clip of Laura Loomer on a tricycle. What's missing is the red rum from The Shining. She rides her tricycle up to Donald Trump. It is funny what they're doing.
That character is actually from a series called Saw. I've never seen it. It's kind of torture porn. Oh. It's a character called Jigsaw.
Oh, okay. And they kind of crossed her appearance with that? Or
yeah,
she already
it's a little puppet, apparently, that rides around on a tricycle. Like I said, I've never seen the movies, so I'm not well informed, but I have seen it enough on social media that I do know the character.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't have that cultural reference there. Anyway, as I pointed out before, the Atlantic actually put out another article from this same reporter, doubling down on this, saying that I've had a lot of people that have come forward to talk to her. She said they find his conduct embarrassing, unbecoming, and a national security vulnerability. And Americans were perhaps less safe as a result. Let's just say, can we stop talking about national security and safety? National security has absolutely nothing to do with the safety of you and I. It has nothing to do with the safety of Americans. It has everything to do with continuity of government. And its national security is about keeping the empire secure, not about keeping peace and prosperity for us. And I just got to say that we wouldn't even need the FBI if we gave up this concept of the national security state. I had the interesting interview with the FBI guy who caught the spy, and there's the back and forth spy versus spy stuff. And it was very interesting, that it always makes for an interesting story. And I liked the guy. He was very interesting. And we talked quite a bit off air about what he's doing in terms of finding art theft and other things like that. He was a very intelligent, interesting guy. I mentioned, he had really long hair, and I thought that was kind of odd for an FBI agent who'd worked for them for 20 some odd years, but he's growing his hair to give to kids who have cancer. little girls who have cancer. So, he was a pretty cool guy. And yet, when you look at the purpose of the FBI, as I've said many times, it was born out of corruption and a kind of bureaucratic, you look at J. Edgar Hoover and the kind of guy that he was and how he used his power at the FBI. It was, as Truman said, the Gestapo, as Nixon said, he's got files on everybody. So that's the true basis of the FBI. I think they deserve somebody like Kash Patel, frankly. So since the moment I published this story, she said, I've been truly inundated with new sourcing that goes to the highest levels of the government who are offering corroborating information. So if you reached out to me and I haven't gotten back to you, it's because I haven't made it there yet. But I am going to call you. And so when she puts that out, just understand that the FBI has probably got her phone number being watched from 50 different ways. This is one of the first things that they did was put out PIN information to see which numbers are being called and which ones are calling you. And that was when they just had dialing phones that they were doing that. So all these people are now on a list. So there are things that we need to do to oppose this. I think the key thing is to put the truth out there. That's about the best thing that we can do, and that is certainly something that we are called to do. Thank you for joining us. Have a good day.
And thank you to Raddest Bro. Again, very generous. Says rich millionaire thieves acting their habits when they steal bottles of alcohol and loot the place in a panic. These are our quote unquote leaders.
Lectures, maybe.
Have a good day.
Much. All right. Bye-bye. The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.